Why did you decide to write this book?
I think that there are certain insults that really hurt. And when I was in government, one of the insults that was directed at me was after the tragic murder of drummer Lee Rigby on our streets. I was involved with the National Security Council and looking at responses to terrorism. And at the time, a right-wing commentator wrote, how can we deal with the war on terror? How can we deal with this issue of terrorism when we have her, Baroness Warsi, the enemy at the table? And I think to be told, nearly 60 years after my grandfather came to this country, 70 years after he had fought in the British Indian Army, years after my father had come to this country and given his sweat and blood for this country, and I was serving my country at the top table in the land, what those comments said to me was that you still don't belong and we still don't trust you. And I felt that the best way with dealing with an insult which really hurts is to field it well, and therefore this book was my way of owning that. That's why I called it The Enemy Within, and unpicking that comment for the nonsense that it was. This is my way of fielding that insult.
What would you like readers to take away from this book?
I hope the book makes people stop and think. I think so much of the discussion around British Muslims is sensationalised, so much of the discussion around terrorism and violence is sensationalised, and I want people to go back to what the evidence is saying. So the lawyer in me, when I was writing this book, went back to evidence and data and research and statistics. So I think there will be moments when this book will challenge and it will make you stop and think, and there are moments when it will probably make you quite angry, but I hope that I can take the reader with me in giving them an inside track of what it feels like to have lived a journey as a British Muslim, the tale of Muslim Britain.
It's interesting that you say that you felt an outsider, because in many ways you were also part of the establishment.
Absolutely, and I think for me I felt that is what I was, until somebody just reminded me once again that actually I wasn't, and I couldn't be trusted, and I was the enemy at the table. And I think in this book what I try and show is that Britain has had a relationship with Islam since the 7th century, and throughout our history Britain and Islam have had comfortable and uncomfortable relationships, and there have been various phases in that journey, and therefore this isn't something new and alien. And also in terms of facing violence, Britain throughout its history has faced violence from groups either from within it or from outside. And again, we've found a way to accommodate and deal with that, and that this is just another episode. And I think I wanted to put this journey of British Muslims and the current terror threat that we feel in a wider context.
Because it's not a memoir, it's more a personal account of your time in and out of government, isn't it?
It is. I mean, it's not an autobiography and it's not a political memoir. It's not the life and times of Sayeeda Warsi. And I didn't want it to be, because I felt that the issues were far too serious for it to be seen just through the prism of my own experience. And I really felt that what I didn't want to write was some sort of a kiss and tell political memoir where people will read it for about a month and say, well, that was interesting, and we learnt a little bit of gossip. I actually wanted this to be much more about young people picking this up and having a sense and a context of their identity and the journey that many communities have been in this country before them.
It's interesting as well because, as you say, your family has had a connection with this country for decades, yet you say that you're not sure whether your grandchildren could call this place home.
And that was a sad moment for me. I mean, we became grandparents this year, and when we heard the news that our daughter-in-law was going to have a baby, it made me stop and think. It made me think that, this was now the 5th generation in the United Kingdom for us as a family. But would that grandchild make Britain their home? Or would they look for a new place? Would Britain continue to be a welcoming, inclusive place for Muslims in future years? Or would people feel, those that can move, would they actually move? And that made me feel both worried and concerned, but also deeply sad. This is my home. This is the home that I want my children and their children to make. But I couldn't be convinced that they would.
So you don't think fundamentally anything is going to change between the wider British society and British Muslims?
Well, this is why I had to write part 3 of the book, which is called Press the Restart Button. And it's a look forward to say, well, this is how we got here. These are the mistakes that we made. But actually, this is the way out. And in that, I have an open conversation with fellow British Muslims. I call them my dear co-religionists. We are not all terrorists, but are we fit for purpose? And I outline what I think could be a very British Islam and what that would look like in 10 years and in 20 years. I'm very challenging of the community in that. I have a very open conversation with my fellow politicians about where policy making has gone wrong and what we need to do in policy making. And then there's a plea and an urge to what I call the rest of us to say, how can we all take those tiny steps to create a sense of ease between Britain and her Muslim communities?